Hi everyone, my name is Sumiksha Dharna and today I'm going to talk about nativism and xenophobia as a problem and how sociologists analyze it and some potential solutions. So in our first slide we'll see what nativism is. So nativism refers to belief or policies that favor native-born people and exclude or discriminate against immigrants. And xenophobia is the emotional counterpart, fear or hatred of non-natives. Together they create social tensions, discrimination and systematic inequalities. And looking at its historical background, in 1800s, many Americans feared that uh, Irish Catholic immigrants would undermine Protestant values and take jobs. And in 1882, the first major law to restrict immigrations based explicitly on nationality targeting Chinese laborers. And in World War II, Japanese Americans were forcibly relocated and incarcerated due to fears of disloyalty. And the post 9/11 Islamophobia, Muslim and Arab communities faced increased suspicion and discrimination after the terrorist attack, and modern anti-immigrant rhetoric. We can see politicians and media often portray immigrants as economic or security threats, continuing the trend of nativist attitudes. And on the other side, we will see sociological theory according to conflict theory. Um, from a conflict theory perspective, nativism is a strategy by which dominant groups maintain their economic, social, and political power. By portraying immigrants as a threat, the native group can justify restrictive policies and preserve resource advantages. And um, the other slide, according to structural functionalism, we can view nativism as a dysfunction in the system. Instead of institutions integrating newcomers, nativist policies fracture social harmony. This weakens the ability of institutions to maintain social order and inclusion. Um, and according to symbolic interactionism, the focus shifts to micro-level interactions, how people talk about immigrants, the labels used, and the gestures used, the stereotypes reinforced. These small acts accumulate to shape broader social attitudes. And the structural or the policy level evidence. Um, on the structural level, Colin Samari and colleagues developed an immigration policy climate (IPC) index to measure how xenophobic or inclusive states' policies are. Between 2009 and 2019, their analysis found that most US states had exclusionary policy climates, a sign that structural xenophobia is deeply embedded. And in a qualitative study by Voss et al. 2021, Latino adolescents described cultural stress in response to mass xenophobia. Students felt discrimination both from outside their ethnic group and within it, internalized their parents' fears, and were deeply affected by political rhetoric. Uh, this shows how xenophobia is not just a policy issue but also affects young people's mental health and identity development. Um, Ramirez studied undocumented Latinx students and described how racist nativism shapes their college experience. According to her, institutional structures and rhetoric undermine their aspirations by limiting access, showing fear, and questioning who deserves opportunities. This is a concrete example of how nativist ideology work within higher education. Here's the movement and social response. Frank W. Young 2016 analyzes nativistic social movements, showing that um, such movements often arise in societies where the state feels weak or threatened. This movement mobilized resources, political, social, around fears of losing cultural identity or national cohesion. The recent trends and theoretical reflection, um, in this one, we can see the uh, Milton Vickerman 2023 argues in his piece Nativism Redux that we are seeing a resurgence of explicit and institutionalized nativism. Institutionalized nativism, not just coded or subtle forms. Um, this helps us understand how old ideas about national belongings are being reworked in modern political context. Likewise, um, to talk about the sociological concepts to frame these issues, um, socialization explains how negative views of immigrants are passed down, whereas um, the role conflict, immigrants, it captures how immigrants navigate conflicting cultural norms and further resource mobilization theory. It explains how nativism movements form and sustain themselves. And group, um, the triad theory, um, also called group position theory, says prejudice often arises when one grows fear losing resources to another. Talking about the potential solutions, to address these problems, solutions must act at multiple levels like educational programs to reduce ignorance, policy reforms to dismantle xenophobic structures, and community label efforts like mentorship or youth groups. Counter spaces, places where marginalized people um, are feel are like people feel safe and respected are especially powerful. The strengths and limitations of the solutions. Each solution has pros and cons. Like education is powerful but slow. Policy work is essential but politically fraught. And community-based interventions are very effective, but frequently lack um, but frequently they lack resources, and a combined multi-level approach is probably most realistic. Yeah, and yeah, in conclusion, um, I think nativism and xenophobia aren't relics of the past. They're alive in US. Like a lot of immigrants face those problems, and yeah, they are still alive in US. The policies, institutions, and everyday interactions. Sociological theory gives us tools to make sense of these phenomena, and empirical studies show the concrete impacts. Tackling this problem requires interventions at many levels. So, yeah, I think nativism and xenophobia are very still alive in US, and we should like work on the solutions, um, operate them at structural or interpersonal levels, spread awareness, maybe. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and we could like uh, see through the perspectives uh, of conflict theory, like the sociological theories, which will help us to figure out the solutions from like different dimensions. Yeah, and that's all. Thank you guys.